Hi guys, and welcome. I am Enigmaeus, and this is episode 18 of the Builder's Guide to Feed the Beast. It's also part 3 of our REDPOWER mini-series, and today we're going to be looking at automated processing. This is where we take everything that we've worked on up to this point, and we start automating it so that we don't have to worry about what's going to our machines or not. We just dump off our junk and we go do the things that we want to do, whether that involves feeding machines or not. Now, when it comes to REDPOWER sorting, I think sometimes people are a little bit put off because they think it's more complicated than it is. I know I've seen more than my share of guides. I've done more than my share of walkthroughs and tours of my facilities that were more complicated than they needed to be by a mile. And then I finally got things down to a system where it's so simple, I think people are confused because they're expecting it to be more complicated. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you the system that I've got here with my Industrial Craft 2 machines, and then we're going to go downstairs and we're going to pull apart my system for my thermal expansion machines, which is very close to identical. And we're going to rebuild it so that you can see I'm not joking when I say it's extremely simple. So what we've got here is, well, actually, remember in a previous episode I showed you my system for emptying my personal inventory when I was in the field. I have my ender pouch, and there was an ender chest down there connected to the filter. I could put things in my ender pouch. They would appear in the chest, and the filter would pull them out and into any of these chests down here. Well, this is basically the same system for pulling items out of a chest, only instead of sending them through a tube into chests, we're sending them through a tube into our processing network. So it's really not complicated at all. We've got an ender chest. In this case, it's coded black, white, white. You can change that by just right-clicking on any of these wool blocks with a piece of dye in your hand. Very easy to get many, many different frequencies, so you can have paired ender chests all over the place without stumbling over one another. And then we've got our filter with the redstone pulse coming from this timer down here, and the tubes. Now in this case, if nothing gets pulled out of the tubes by these guys here, the stuff will end up in this chest, and you can see I've got already some overflow items that aren't accounted for in the processing up here, and that's fine. That's why I have this chest here. Eventually this will be gone, and instead it'll be going to storage, and the only overflow chest that we have will be as sort of a communication device for the user to say either the chest that normally holds this item is full, do something about it, or you didn't tell me what you wanted me to do with this particular kind of item, so here it is, now figure it out. We'll get to that at some point in the not too distant future. For now, just know that an overflow chest, especially when you're setting things up, can be very, very handy, and you set it up just by having your network extend, and then there you go. So the way that we're sorting this, as you can see, I've got my Industrial Craft 2 machines here, and a lot of them. And that's sort of key to this whole thing, is that ideally you want to have one machine for each kind of material that you want to process. So for example, you can see I've got a macerator here, and this is just for coal. I've got another one here. I forgot why I put it there. So I don't have a filter over it, grabbing items out of the tubes. I've got 2 compressors here. This one will be for carbon plates. This one will be for advanced alloy. But I don't have any mixed alloy ingots or carbon balls or whatever to set up the filters for them, so they don't have filters right now either. But then I've got the 2 extractors, one for rubber wood, one for sticky resin, and then I've got all these filters, one for copper, one for tin, one for iron, one for silver, one for gold, one for lead. And this guy at the end also has no filter because I forget what I put him there for as well. It doesn't matter. Ultimately, the system is set up so that you can add or subtract machines from it without having to worry about having to pull apart the entire network in order to make it work again. So that's sort of one of the benefits of it. And the way it works is with these passive filters at the top. They're the exact same as that guy there, only they aren't receiving any kind of redstone pulse or redstone signal. They just sit there. And all you do is put the item into this little, you right click on the filter and it brings up this GUI. You put an item in there and that tells the filter, accept only this kind of item, right? So you can see this macerator I said is for coal. So I've got a piece of coal in there. This one here I said is for rubber wood for the extractor, sticky resin for the extractor, pulverized copper, tin, right? This one's iron, gold. So that it's literally that simple as putting a filter over top of the machine with the tubes running over the tops of the filters. Make sure your input side, the plus side on the filter, is facing the tube. and the filters will grab whatever quantity of material passes over them that you've specified in their little grid here. So you could, if you wanted, have more than one kind of material, but I don't recommend it, because then what happens if the machine is already full servicing one kind of material and it gets another kind? That's why I have an individual machine for each kind of material that I want to process, it so I don't have to worry about that. And then you've got the output to worry about, which is basically nothing complicated at all. I know industrial craft 2 machines output on the front. That's what you'll need to be aware of as you're working with different mods and different machines, is where does the output come from when I want to pull it out by tube. In this case, it comes out from the front on all of these machines. So I've got my pneumatic tubes running all the way down here into this retriever. Now, I don't think I've shown you the recipe for pneumatic tubes. It's just 2 brass ingots. You make these in your alloy furnace and a piece of glass. But the retriever is kind of a special little guy. I'm going to have to pull up the recipe because I left my other retriever downstairs. Oh, that's not what I wanted. There we go. So it's a filter with a piece of leather, 2 brass ingots, and the ender pearls, and that's what makes them a little bit spendy. But fortunately, we don't use a ton of these throughout the sorting and processing sort of system. We just use them to pull out from the outputs of the machines that we're processing from, and this one filter is enough to handle the outputs for all of these machines, unless it's like crazy busy. If I was running, say, 4 quarries, I would probably put another retriever on this line just to help out with the load and make sure the machines are getting emptied quickly. But for the time being, this one is plenty. And the thing with the retrievers is they do need blue electric power. You can see I've got the blue electric battery in behind there, and they do need the redstone pulse to work. So you can see it's on the same conduit as the filter up top. And anything that goes through these machines here will get pulled out as soon as it's done and into this chest in the back. And you can see I've already run some tests, quite a few tests. And this is the resulting ingots from all the furnaces. And even some coal went through and converted into coal dust. So that's the core of the system, is feeding the machines, pulling the output from the machines, and then storing the output somehow. So to illustrate that better, we're going to come down here, and I've got my thermal expansion pulverizers here. Now, the reason why I'm using pulverizers instead of macerators for all of my ingots, all of the ores, you know, iron and gold and tin and stuff, is because for most of them, if you pulverize them, there's a chance that you can get certain bonus materials that you wouldn't get if you macerated. So in terms of the yield, pulverizing tends to be a little bit better than macerating. Otherwise, you know, macerators are still, you know, rotary macerators are still faster. So all I'm doing here is pulling this apart so that you can watch me rebuild it. Now, that should tell you something right away, is if it's simple enough that I'm not afraid to pull it apart and rebuild it, then it can't be that complicated at all. So we're just going to break these guys, make sure we gather everything up. Filters, I just want to point out, if you're, for example, if you've already got a system in place and running with materials passing through your tubes, and you're adding new filters to the recipe, or new filters to the system for a new machine or whatever, filters are greedy little piggies, and they will eat anything unless you tell them not to. And the way you tell them not to is by getting an item into their little GUI. So as long as it's empty, they will pull anything that goes by, and you just want to keep that in mind so that you can, you know, unclog your machines after you get everything set up. So what we've got here is exact same setup for retrieving from a chest. It's a pulsing filter beside an ender chest going into a pneumatic tube. That's just a redstone wireless receiver. It's connected to a timer on a transmitter. So for all practical intents and purposes, that's a timer creating a pulse. I wouldn't be too concerned about that for now. And you can see it's receiving the pulse, sending items that it gets down here, and then we've got these pulverizers, and we've also got a sawmill over here. Now, just so that we're extra clear, I'll pull one of these out, and I've already set up these machines. You remember the thermal expansion machines have the configurable inputs and outputs. So I'll just do this with one of these guys. You can see I just put it in front of one of the redstone conduits there. And then all running all the way around the back. And then we've got, this is the input is the blue, and then we've got the basic output. So if you're pulverizing iron, your pulverized iron will end up here. But then this is for your secondary output. So for iron, it ends up being ferrous dust. Every once in a while, you'll get a piece of pulverized ferrous dust or whatever that will show up here. We don't necessarily need to have these on separate outputs. So what we can do, first of all, is we'll isolate the, the sides that we aren't using. We can't use anything we can't send stuff to or from the back because the redstone conduit is connected to the back of the machine. We don't want anything connecting, input or output from the right side because there's a wall there. There's a machine on the other side. So these are all blocked off now. We'll take our input, our raw materials from the top, and then the output, if you set it to orange, it's a combined output. So you don't have to worry about having two different output catchers, so to speak. It'll all go out the bottom. Now, we'll just set up the top first, the input side, and we just run our our pneumatic tube one block above the machines so that we leave room for our filters. Oh, those are transposers. We don't want to use those. That's something else entirely. And then the filters. Oops. Filter. I usually just try and set up my filters all at once and then come back and reorient them. You can see now the inputs are all facing me, which is obviously not what we want. We want the inputs facing the pipe. So then we switch to our screwdriver and we reorient them as we need them. Now you'll notice again, we haven't set them up on any kind of redstone current. There's no wiring that we've done. We haven't set them, hooked them up to any kind of power. They're just there. So then we put our screwdriver away and now we can set up their inputs. So we want this guy to take copper and this guy will take tin. Here we'll take iron ore. Where's silver? There's silver. This is just the order that makes sense to me. You can put them in whatever order makes sense to you. In my case, it's more from the ordering of materials that you usually get items in MMOs. So that's sort of what I use because I'm familiar with it. And obsidian is not necessarily because I want to pulverize all of my obsidian, because I want to pulverize some of it. And we'll get into that in the next episode when we do the pre-sort and sending only some of a particular kind of resource through our processing system and the rest into storage. So you can see we've got all of our ores accounted for and the obsidian. And then over here, I've kind of broken my rule a little bit just because I know and I can account for it when I'm setting things up. But I've got oak and spruce in the filter. It's because I don't do a lot of harvesting for wood. So when I usually have wood, it's usually one type, and then I don't I don't mind sending it through the system if it's one type because I know I'm not going to overload it. If I were to get into automated wood harvesting sort of thing with the chance of getting both at the same time, then I would split it up into two different machines. So now we need to handle the outputs. And the one thing about thermal expansion machines is that they will not connect their output side to pneumatic tubes, which made me sad. I was not very happy at all when I found that out, but there's a workaround now. If you want to connect to Buildcraft pipes and handle your output that way, that's fine. Remember, thermal expansion machines will automatically eject their output into, a storage device or a pipe that's connected to their output side. I'm not going to do that because I wasn't happy with any of the Buildcraft setups that I was able to come up with. I tried iron pipes, I tried gold pipes. I was willing to spend a little bit extra to use these guys, which are buffers. You can see there are 4 iron bars and 4 wood planks. They're not really expensive. They're more expensive than nothing, obviously, but just so that I can keep using the REDPOWER stuff that's smarter than the Buildcraft stuff, I was happy to spend it. So that's what I've got here. Now, the thing with the buffers is they're basically like an organized chest. If you right-click on it, you can see it's got these 5 columns. It's because the inputs... the square here is the output, and the other 5 sides are the input. And the input that it receives from a specific side ends up in its own specific column. So there are uses for that, first of all, but in this case, all I care about is that these guys are happy to eject their output into the buffer, and then I can connect my pneumatic pipes to the front of it. So that unless thermal expansion adds the functionality to connect pneumatic tubes to the you know, the machines on the output side, this is sort of what I would be happy to use, or I would be willing to use, I guess would be another way of looking at it. Now, somewhere along the line, I've used or lost a pneumatic tube, and I'm hoping, yes, that I carried more with me. So what we do, again, this is all just because the machine has already ejected the items into the buffer, though it's not going to automatically eject from the buffer into the tubes as well. So then we treat it just like a chest or an Industrial Craft 2 machine. We want to set up a retriever to pull everything out like that. And now the output side, or sorry, the input side is facing the pipe because we want to pull stuff through here into this side and then out into this ender chest. We've got already, we've got a timer set up that's creating the pulse that this guy will run on. And we've got a battery box, which should make this guy happy. You can see he's powered up. There's nothing to pull right now, so he won't show any indication that he's pulsing. But what we can do, hopefully, is we'll head upstairs and we'll find something in a chest that we can use to demonstrate that our system is in fact working. I'm going to take my chances and poke around in here. See if we get lucky. I've got so much aluminum that's unprocessed and so little of anything else because I've been kind of messing around with this new system of sorting and processing with the passive filters instead of all kinds of item sorters and things of that nature, that I've kind of tapped out my reserve. I know I've got some iron downstairs, so that's where we'll go. It's just right down here. Where there it is. This will be plenty. You'll just, as long as you can see the items moving through the tubes, it should be enough to illustrate the system works. So, because this ender chest is the 3 white coating, I can put the items into my ender pouch to get things started. So it pulls it, and you'll see momentarily it'll come down into the pipes, into the chest that we've designated for iron sorting. A little bit of lag there. And then in a couple of seconds, we'll see the first. Oh, we got some ferrous dust too. So we've got the iron, pulverized iron, and the bonus pulverized ferrous or whatever goes into the chest. And then the chest is going to pull that out upstairs. And we should be able to see some iron ingots being made as soon as we get up on the right floor. So you can see there's the iron dust. There's the iron ingots from the first batch that went through. Gets pulled into this system here, and voila. And the ferrous dust ends up in the overflow. There's the ones that I was losing from the greedy little filters. So that's it. That's the core of the processing system. Now, I'm going to be doing a little bit of work behind the scenes getting ready for the next episode, so don't be surprised if you see things just tweaked a tiny bit here and there. But if you were to set up something like this for yourself, you would be in good shape to just kind of pick up on the next episodes and sort of add and evolve your system as we go. I hope it was helpful for you. I hope, if anything, that I've illustrated to you just how simple it is to set this up. If you have any feedback, by all means, leave it below the video. If you want to be notified when the next video is added, the easiest way to do that is to make sure you're subscribed to my channel. So in the meantime, thanks for watching and take care, guys.